So hello guys, we have with us a very special guest today, Mr. Vighnesh Gupta, who is a part of the recruitment team of the Aditya Birla Group Futures Leader program. So we'll have a discussion, a candid discussion with him today as to how his experience has been and how what is his guidance to the freshers and the CA aspirants. So let me tell you a brief about him. Mr. Vignesh is working as a research analyst with the Aditya Birla Group Sun Life AMC, and he had secured All India rank 43 in his CA finals, and he is a CFA level 3 candidate. He had done his articleship from EY and has been currently working as ABG-FLP for 2 years now with Aditya Birla Group and is a part of the interview team, the recruitment team of Aditya Birla Group FLP. So hi Vignesh.
Hey, hi Ayush. Thank you for the introduction. I think first of all, I must point out that what you're currently doing with this series would be very helpful for people watching this. And if when I look back 2 years ago and applying for this role, if we had something like this, that would have been extremely helpful. So yeah, great initiative.
Thank you, Vignesh. Thank you for that. So let's straight away come to the questions that we have in line for you. The first one is, what exactly is ABG Futures Leader Program? What is it?
Sure. So, Ayush, so the ABG Finance Leadership Program is a subset of the broader ABGLP program. So that stands for Aditya Birla Group Leadership Program, right? So as a part of that, Aditya Birla Group essentially hires, a set of people every year where they would fall under three broad categories. So one would be LEAPS, which is Leadership Associate, where they would be hiring people from premier MBA institutes like IIM, ABC, L, Indore, and so on. And then you have the HRLP program, which is Human Resources Leadership Program, where again, some people would be hired from an HR background from again the top institutes in India. And then you have the FLP program, from where I've been working is the Finance Leadership Program, where ABG hires CA rankers from each term, and essentially to build a long-term career talent kind of pipeline of finance leaders who can then go on and take up top positions, finance positions, as well as strategy positions within the group.
So if someone joins this program, probably after say 10 to 15 years, he will be leading some group company or will be a part of the strategy and leadership team, right?
Yeah, of course. Now it all depends on performance, but yeah, that's the intention, to develop future finance leaders for the group.
So that's great. So how is ABG FLP different from the FLP initiatives of the other companies which are there?
Sure. So that's a fair question, Ayush. I think the intention behind any management training program is to essentially train future leaders, right? Which is very similar to what many other companies would do. Now, I think where ABG kind of stands out for me is the fact that ABG, being such a conglomerate, is present across a very diverse set of sectors. So we would be from let's say aluminum and metals and cement, basic old industry sectors, to modern sectors like finance, where I currently working on asset management and fashion and retail and stuff like that. So what it does, give fresh CA freshers essentially is the option to work across not just functions but also sectors and geographies. And then it gives them a kind of 1 year time frame, which would enable someone to have a sense of what their interests are, what they would like to do, and then immense portability within the group. So you can kind of decide what you want to do. You can do that, and then also every 2 or 3 years, if you want, you can keep moving to different sectors, geographies, and different kinds of roles. So in itself, ABG is a very large conglomerate, and that enables a lot of portability and flexibility, which is where I think ABG stands out in terms of its management trainee program.
So that is a great thing that you can move from one sector to other and you can find where your interest lies. So that is the very good part of this program, which probably is not offered by this opportunity to shift from one sector to other is not provided by other management trainee programs. So that is good. So how has your experience been? Work, you've been there for 2 years. So how has your experience been? Where have you worked and all?
Yeah, so Ayush, I joined in June 2019, and the way the program is structured essentially is that you have three stints of 4 months each in the first year, and then after that you are assigned a permanent role where you would be working for 2 or 3 years before you decide on whether you want to take a switch. So for my first three stints in year one, my first stint was with Novelis. So Novelis is a American subsidiary of Hindalco, the listed Indian company. So I spent the first 4 months in Georgia, Atlanta, in US, and I worked on. So they had acquired a company back then called Alaris, which was its competitor in the US, and I was working on some pre-merger planning on the integration of these two companies. My second stint was back in Mumbai. So I was working with the group corporate finance team. The group corporate finance team is essentially the basically an internal consultant for all ABG group companies, uh, focusing on finance, M&A, and cost structuring, etc., which is again a very good experience. From there, in my third stint, I moved to a completely different line role where I was working with the risk team at Aditya Birla Health Insurance. And I was so this was the time when COVID had hit us, last year, and so business continuity planning, as well as they were also implementing a new system. So I was helping implement it and ensure that it would be scalable and flexible. So very different experience across three stints. But at the end of it, I always wanted to do a finance role, and I was lucky enough to be placed in our mutual fund business. So I'm in the fixed income investments team currently. So what we essentially do, all of us have heard about mutual funds. We invest in them, right? And then this pool of money, what we call assets under management or AUM, is then invested by the mutual fund in equity and debt instruments. So I'm in the fixed income part of the team. So we have an AUM of 1,75,000 crores, which is both from retail and corporates. And we are a team of roughly 15 odd people, and then we essentially invest that money on behalf of our unit holders. So it's a great role in terms of it gives you a lot of uh, uh, you know uh, learning in terms of what's happening around in the economy. You get a sense of how government policies, how RBI policies, how they are impacting markets, where interest rates are headed, a lot of forecasting. So it has been a great experience for me so far.
I can see the excitement in your voice itself. Like it's been a very, very good experience. You worked overseas, you worked in India in various sectors. The experience has been really amazing. Yeah. So I would ask you, what are the things that one should know before applying for this program or before joining ABG?
Sure. So perhaps I'll walk you through the recruitment process first. I think because that would be something which people should know about. So this FLP program, first of all, is restricted only for rank holders who have gotten a rank in their first attempt. After you get a rank, you are essentially, so there is a three-stage process, if I can put it that way. So first, there would be some online tests which would take place, which would be psychometric tests, some logical reasoning, and basic tests which are taken by most companies when they want to shortlist a set of candidates for further rounds of interviews. So that essentially helps ABG identify a set of candidates that they want to take on to the next round, right? So so the invitation essentially goes out first to all rank holders, and then from there, after this online screening round, we get a set of depending from 30, 40 to maybe 50 odd people who would then interview in the second round. In the second and third round is essentially a two-stage personal interview where finance leaders within the group would then assess the candidate in a one-on-one personal interview, and there would be two of these rounds, and at the end of it we would essentially then decide which candidates we are looking to hire.
Okay. So the for this interview process, can I understand one thing? Like, since all of them are rank holders, so how do you filter out the candidates? So what is it that you look for in the candidates during an interview? As you are a part of the interview team. part of the recruitment team, right? So what do you look for in a candidate?
Yeah, so I've had a good amount of experience with the interviewing process because I interviewed first for the role. The next year I was a facilitator, and then just this year I was part of the interview panel as well. So so essentially, I think technical knowledge is something which is a given, because all of them essentially are rank holders, right? So that is something which won't be a differentiating factor when you're looking at different rank holders. I think what essentially makes a difference, and what I and other interviewers look at often is business understanding. How you are able to understand what's happening around the world, how it impacts business, and a general sense of awareness, in the sense of being aware of what's happening around you, being up to date with all events in the world which are happening and how they impact business. So I think that is often what makes a difference. We also have a case study which we give out to interviewees, where we would give them a real life business situation, and then to also check for their comprehension of the situation, and what they have been able to understand as to the drivers behind success or failure, whatever that we take up in that case study.
Okay, so can you throw some more light on the case study part? Like what does it what is it what does it include, and how can one prepare for that case interview or case study? Like what is it? I can you throw some light?
Sure. So these case studies are, generally classic, business case studies which you would find in, your MBA colleges or your Harvard case studies. These typical B school case studies which are, taught to students, where, uh, people are asked to kind of understand various events which have taken place, right? So, for example, a classic case, if I could give you an example, was Microsoft's acquisition of Nokia, right? So that's a very classic case study which is taken up in B schools. So something along those lines, different business events, and then trying to then obviously we put those case studies up to our candidates, and then pose questions based on how they have been able to understand and identify the reasons behind certain events which have taken place, and what learnings we can draw from that.
Okay, so I understand that one has to be up with the current affairs and what's happening in the economy and the business world, right?
That's right.
So now, Vignesh, we've come to the end of this interview. So before we finish off with this, I would like to ask you: is there any piece? What would be your last piece of advice to the aspirants and to the freshers who recently qualified?
Sure, Ayush. So I think one thing which is very important to keep in mind is that ABG is a very large organization, right? So the experience of people is very different based on where they eventually end up working with, right, or whatever company they end up working for. So it's important to understand that not all roles would, if you're looking for a fast-paced startup kind of experience, ABG may not be able to provide that same experience, in all roles, because it's a large conglomerate which has been here for centuries or at least decades. So what happens as a result is, like, if you're looking for a very fast-paced kind of dynamic business role which you would otherwise find in startups, that may not be possible in all roles, right? So from that standpoint, it's very important to anchor your expectations, because experience for different candidates can be very different, based on where you eventually end up working. The other aspect that I would like to highlight is that even within the group, right, since there are so many different uh, roles, what I started out essentially with, flexibility is something which is very good. So if you are not sure about what you want to do, right, and you don't have a sense of where your interests are, I think it's a great place to be, because in the first year you get exposure across sectors. So that essentially allows you to get an understanding of different sectors, and also gives you a little bit of time to understand what is it that they want, that one person wants to do in their career. So I think that's the biggest positive.
Okay. So thank you, Vighnesh, for your time and valuable inputs. I think all our viewers will benefit a lot out of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Ayush.
Hi, my name is Mira Kumar. I cleared my CA final in November 2020 attempt with All India rank 49. And so I was eligible to attend the interview for the finance leadership program. And my interview was quite straightforward. A major chunk of my interview was in discussing the case study. So that took up about 15 to 20 minutes. And after that, it was followed by some general technical questions, which started off by asking about my articleship experience. And then based on the answers I was giving, they were questioning me about what I had seen in my articleship practically, basically. So that was the basic structure of my interview.
Hi everyone, I am Rishabh Choudhary, and I cleared my CA final examination in November 2020 and secured an All India rank 49. I'll be joining as an ABG-FLP in this June 2021. Okay, so the answer to the first question would be, my interview part was broken into 4 structures basically. The first part was broken into the personal questions. I was asked about my articleship experience, like the background I was from, what I did in my free time. The second part was, I was asked about the some business questions or technical questions, like how do you analyze a cash flow statement? How do you understand ROE or ROCE? Or in that aspect, the questions were asked. The third part was broken into the case study questions. We were given a case study to read before the interview, and then the questions were asked about the case study itself. And the final part was broken into some HR basic questions. I was asked some questions related to HR, like how would you react in a particular situation? The questions were mostly focused on behavioral management.
I'm Sreeraman. I secured All India 38th rank in CA final new syllabus November 2020 exams. I pursued my articleship in Grand Thornton, Chennai. So answering the first question, at the beginning, I was asked to speak about myself, and there were a few questions based on what I told. That went for 2 to 3 minutes. Then there were questions based on the case study that was given. That went for 7 to 8 minutes. Then there were technical questions related to the discussion on the case study. That went for 8 to 10 minutes. And after that, there were a few other technical questions, which went for around 10 minutes.
So the case I got was relating to the merger of two major players in the global cement industry, one French company called Lafarge and one Swiss company called Holcim. And this was a real life case scenario. So they merged in 2015. So the case, we were given the case study 1 hour before the interview started. So we were in a chat room and we had access to the case study, and it had a lot of information, about 8 to 9 pages of information, which is a lot to process in 1 hour. So you kind of have to pick out whatever is important. It was basically details about both the companies and some numbers, the historical balance sheet P&L of both the companies and the valuation of the companies. Like it was a 1:1 merger. So they had given us a lot of details like this. And so we had that 1 hour to prepare. And then in the interview itself, like I said, a major chunk of my interview was about the case. So they asked me what I thought was the purpose of the merger and my opinion on the valuation, which was the question that I anticipated, because the case itself did not have any question or point of contention at the end of the case study, right? So I kind of expected this question. So I took a lot of time explaining what calculations I had done in that 1 hour, how I valued the company. So they didn't ask me too many questions. Most of the interview went in me explaining what my opinion that I had formed on the merger. And then once that was over, they asked some general technical questions, which started off with the typical how was your articleship experience. So one tip that I want to say for this question is that don't say when you're asked about your articleship experience, don't bring up some complicated issue that you were not fully involved in, that somebody else in your team did, just to try and impress the interviewer. Say something that you've seen properly in your articleship, something that you're very confident in, a safe topic. So for me, it was Ind AS 116. I've seen the most of us have seen the implementation of Ind AS 116 in our statutory audit, and I had also seeing some internal control testing majorly. So I brought that up. So they were questioning me about that. They went into detail about Ind AS 116. They asked me what is the effect on the P&L and balance sheet. How will it affect the financial statements? And then when I told them that your EBITDA will increase because your rental expense gets moved down as interest expense and interest expense. So basically, they were questioning me more and more based on the answers that I was giving. So yeah, that was majorly what happened. It was about Ind AS 116.
Give you questions. Well, I don't remember the questions that were asked exactly, but I could broadly tell you. One set of questions about valuations in a case of a merger, the use of multiples in valuations, and the importance of fundamentals in determining the value of a company and fixing the premium that the buying company would have to pay. Two questions regarding the amendment in direct tax through budget 2021 that would affect mergers and acquisitions, and how I would advise my client in order to minimize the negative impact of the same. Three, a set of questions wherein I was asked to assume that I was the CFO of the company, and I was asked to provide solutions reviews.
The case study I was given was about the Microsoft acquisition of Nokia. It was one of the biggest mergers and acquisitions that we have seen. So जैसे मेरा interview था 4 बजे, तो around 3:20 I was given the case study to read. So what I did was I covered my case study till 3:50, and after that in the last 10 minutes, I tried to analyze what can be the possible questions that could be asked in the interview. So I had that complete framework, and what happened in the interview was around 80% of the questions that they asked were already framed in my mind. And the top 3 questions that were asked from me in the interview were: the first question was on the business structures of InvITs and REITs. As we all know, the Infrastructure Investment Trust and the Real Estate Investment Trust. So they tried to know that if I had any knowledge of the business structure, what are the advantages of making InvITs and all. The second question was covered from the current affairs part. They asked me what were the possible reasons for a rising inflation in the US economy. So उस टाइम क्या हुआ था कि stimulus spending बढ़ी थी US में. So that would mean more cash into the economy. So उसके कारण जो inflation rate था वो काफी बढ़ चुका था उस टाइम. तो उन्होंने वो current affairs का part भी वहाँ से cover कर लिया. And the third question was a bit of consulting part. Like they asked me, how would you approach to a particular situation? So they gave me a situation like, if we'll tell you to count the number of swimming pools we have in India. So I was a bit surprised by the question, and they told me that you can have 10 to 15 seconds and then you can start. So I told them that I would bifurcate the cities into the number of population. Then I'll take the median age. Like we all know, the median age in India is 28 years. But वो city wise bifurcate करना, जैसे हरिद्वार में median age काफी ज़्यादा होगा as compared to Bombay. So I would go with that approach. Yeah, so they were very satisfied with that answer.
Firstly, there was a 30-minute online aptitude assessment, which was pretty tough. Secondly, the interview itself was based on a case study. And lastly, there were a set of questions wherein I was asked to assume that I was the CFO of the company and provide solutions review. So I found this different because I had not been asked similar questions in the other interviews that I had given.
So to prepare for the interview, I reached out to people on LinkedIn who had joined the finance leadership program in the previous year. And based on what they told me, I revised on some Ind AS, some commonly asked Ind AS, SFM valuation topics, which is very important, which actually helped me with the case. I brushed up on taxation. I tried to update myself on current affairs. And I spent a lot of time researching about Aditya Birla's group companies, about which all sectors they're involved in, how their company is performing in that sector, who are their competitors, and how are they affected by COVID, and how are they recovering from COVID. In the financials, I took the financials of all the companies, all the listed companies, and I read the chairman's letter and the management discussion analysis report. All these are really important documents. That can give you an understanding and insight into what the company is looking for in future, and that way you can know how to impress the people who are interviewing you. So yeah.
So basically, I didn't specially prepare anything for this interview, but what happens is, जब उनको practical understanding समझनी है, तो you should be completely aware of what's going on in the business world in India as well as outside India. मतलब पूरी world economy में क्या हो रहा है, कौन सी world में अभी war चल रहे हैं, कौन सी country में inflation rate ज़्यादा हो रहा है, वैक्सीन प्रोडक्शन मेनली कहाँ पे हो रहे हैं, तो ये सब चीज़ें मालूम होना बहुत ज़रूरी है उस चीज़ के लिए. तो you should be completely aware about the current affairs that are going right now.
We got to know that the interview would be based on case studies and that it would be different than a consulting case interview. However, I felt that the structures, the standard structures used for consulting case interviews would be helpful to approach a business situation that is given to me. So I first acquainted myself with those structures to some extent. And then I thought of other business situations that could possibly be given to me. And I ran through a few structures or frameworks at a high level so that I could, approach those situations if they are given to me in the interview.
My only tip is that when you're going for an interview with a company like this, with such a sought after program, it can be kind of daunting to give and you'll have that fear of being rejected, right? So the thing is to go in with the mindset that it's okay if you get rejected. You will have other companies, you will have other offers. Something good will happen. So you have to go in with that mindset to quell your nerves. Otherwise, you're going to be very nervous in the interview, and that will show very obviously to the interviewer. So that's the only thing to keep in mind when you're interviewing for any company, not just Aditya Birla.
तो अभी फिर से मैं वही चीज़ बोलूँगा कि rather than just focusing on the theoretical knowledge जो books में है, try to apply it with what's happening in the practical world. मतलब जैसे आपका FR है, तो Ind AS 116 से क्या impact चल रहे हैं अभी इंडस्ट्री पे. For example, you can compare one company's balance sheet that was prior to Ind AS 116 and what happened after Ind AS 116 was implemented. What happened to the profit, what happened to the EBITDA and all. मतलब ये सब चीजें बुक्स में कहीं नहीं मिलेगी. These things you can only know if you are well aware what's going on in the practical world.
Firstly, regarding the online aptitude assessment, there were questions based on logical reasoning, data interpretation, data sufficiency, and pattern identification and the like. So a candidate could probably consider going through CAT questions for preparation. There were 30 questions that we had to answer in 30 minutes. So speed was of great importance. Secondly, the interview would be based on a case study, but there is nothing much in specific that a candidate could prepare for the case studies, because the case studies could be literally anything. But I would suggest having a calm mind so that the candidate can process the information better and come up with different solutions in an easier manner.